come once again to discuss things.
It's the eye of the tiger, it's the fear of the fight, rising up to the challenge of our rivals. And the last known survivor stalks his prey in the night, and he's watching us all in the eye of the tiger.
That is worth a good laugh.
Face to face,
All right, you ready to go ahead and get
out
started?
in the heat,
One-on-one.
hanging tough.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen here on Geeky Gentlemen History Month, the month where we discuss the contributions geeky gentlemen have made to history, but that have been ignored by biased educational system, except not at all. I hope everyone is really enjoying that joke because I beat it further and further into the ground every time I say it. Anyway, I am Sid2. Joining me today is Aussie Griffin.
Hey guys, good to talk to you all again.
Indeed it is. Unfortunately, Steve could not join us tonight. I was really excited to hear his thoughts on this, but such is life, such is Geeky Gentlemen. Eventually, it'll just be me doing the voices of other people, because getting people onto this show is harder and harder as time goes on. People, quit having lives and friends and outside contact. I should be enough. Anyway, so Ozzy, what are we talking about tonight?
Today we're doing it's a niche cartoon based on a cult comic book called Persepolis.
Yep, Persepolis. I don't care how it's pronounced. It's a foreign word. It's not meant to be pronounced by English speakers, so we're gonna butcher the shit out of that and plenty of other things. There's gonna be a lot of butchering today, so just deal with that in a variety of terms. So anyway, Persepolis is the story of a childhood. It says it right on the front, the story of a childhood, and then on the back of it, it says the story of a return. I'm actually holding the comics that the movie is based on.
Nice.
And it is a biographical film, because we're talking about the film. It's a biographical film about Marjan Satrapi. Once again, butchering names today. Marjan Satrapi's childhood and early teen years growing up in Iran during the 1979 revolution.
And it's beautiful.
So
it really is.
Oh, it is gorgeous. And so it's a first-hand account of history told through a comic book originally. Originally, I really wanted to do the comic, but it just wasn't feasible. First-hand account of history told through a comic book and then made into a really, really fascinating animated film. So I'd only read the book one time about a year and a half ago now, because I'd heard about it vaguely, but I never really knew what it was. I just remember the art style, since that was kind of distinctive. But I'd heard about it vaguely, and then I had to read it for a history class, because we were doing, a bunch of first-hand account stuff. And so, blah, 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 blah. I've never really gotten into it until last year, and then doing it for History Month just seemed really appropriate, since this has kind of a geeky slant to it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what is your experience with this book in the past?
Persepolis is one of those stories that it gets me every single time. It is very, very emotional, and it is very, very human in the way it does what it does. A lot of people say that history isn't about fact memorization or some people say it's about fact memorization. Some people say history is just about, battles and, socio-political movements and, who won what when and, who's basically won a measuring contest, historically speaking. And Persepolis really champions my view of history, which is everyone's got a story. Everyone had their experiences. And you remember two different stories from everything you do. You remember the plain facts that your senses took in, and you then remember the truth of the matter, in addition to the facts. And Persepolis just cuts to the dual view between both. It's like, and it does it in a way that almost anyone can relate to, if you can, unless you are the most close-minded, judgmental, and let's be honest, there's way too many of those people turning themselves into that people out there. Unless you just don't want to look, you can see yourself in this comic in about 3 seconds.
Oh yeah, I mean, the stuff when she's a kid, I gotta say, I think that, I mean, it's obviously helps that she's writing her own experiences and, playing it up a little bit, but sure.
Definitely.
But it helps that she's writing her own experiences, but clearly this is the best writing for a kid I've seen since South Park. And that sounds absurd, but, like, South Park is a really good show because they perfectly capture how kids think. Like, there's that one really good episode where the kids get, nunchucks and swords, and so suddenly they're magical ninja warriors that have superpowers
Yeah, that was awesome.
in their mind. And like that, there's a lot of that in this. Like there's, in the movie, there's the scene where they see the one kid riding the bike.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, oh, his father killed over 1 million people, so we're gonna torture him. We're gonna, stick nails in his eyes and whip him on the head with an electrical cord and force him to eat this garbage.
Yeah,
that's exactly how kids think. That's exactly the kind of thought process that goes through their mind. And to them, it's a game, and that's why her mom is so damn pissed when she sees what she's doing.
And it's funny. It's not. This is one of the things I say to people when I know they're going to have kids. I'm like, do you remember those annoying things your parents used to do to you? Yeah. Well, you know what? Try to see it from your kid's point of view, and you'll probably inflict less of those experiences on your kids. Nobody's perfect. You'll get less.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things. I think the way she writes herself as a child is so perfect in this, though.
Well, she's honest,
yeah, that's the thing. It must be really hard to be that honest, because some of this stuff is not pretty.
Oh, it's...
not even just when she's a kid. There's some stuff later on in the book when she's, late teens, maybe early 20s, where that's got to be really hard to even to allude to, because there's that scene when she's in, I believe it's Austria.
Yeah. That's right, yeah.
Where she's depicting her, or where they're depicting her life as a homeless person. There's that one, it's really, really brief. But she's sleeping in an alley, and she, turns to wake up, and two shadows just kind of come toward her in the alley, and just kind of blacks out the screen.
Yeah.
And then after that, she starts sleeping on the train. I'm reasonably sure, I'd never picked up on it in the book, but I went and looked, and I'm pretty sure, I didn't go and look. I thought to go and look, but I didn't. I'm pretty sure that's in the book too, the more I think about it, though. And I'm pretty sure that's an allusion to that she was raped while she was a homeless person.
Yeah, well, she doesn't, they never say it, and they damn well don't depict it.
That is so, it's the fact that that they show it so quickly, and it's like, what else could it be? And then when she's, back home, her demand from her parents is, don't ask me about it. Don't ask me any questions. And so just the honesty with which she does this. And even, that's, those moments that I've talked about are kind of dark, but, when she talks about, falling in love with the white guy that was ashamed of her to his mother and everything, she so honestly depicts just how completely in love she was with him, and then when they break up, she honestly depicts exactly how she felt.
Well, not just how she felt, like that's what I said, it's the second layer of it. First she depicts, riding with him in the car as being fun and lovely, and he was a brilliant rider, and the minute she finds that he's cheating on her, she suddenly realizes that, no, his riding was crap, once again, could be coloured, don't know whether he's a good rider or not, and then, she remembers him, she conveniently left out the first time that, yeah, she was buying weed for him, and, he had her do it because he didn't want to get arrested. And you're like, yeah, the guy's kind of scum. But the way she depicts herself actively vomiting as soon as she reads any of his writing,
right?
That was brilliant.
Oh, yeah, some of the animation in this is just so freaking hilarious, too. Both compelling and hilarious at times. Like, I love... It doesn't completely, but there's a couple things in this that almost put it above the comic for me. And one of them is the movement of her hair at certain times. Because, I mean, that's the whole thing about the veil, the shawl, whatever you want to call it, is it covers the hair because that's apparently way too sexual and everything. It covers the hair, and so whenever we see her hair in this, it's always doing something. Like, the best part, or the best example for me, is when she's rocking out to Iron Maiden in her room, and she's, like, headbanging, and the hair is so dynamic in how it's moving. I thought it was perfect.
Well, it's a running motif in the film that, and this was kind of a thing from the 60s as well, hair is a symbol of freedom. Because, yeah, damn it, it's and they go more into this in the comic book, which I've only seen bits and pieces of, but it's pretty good. It shows how the regime that came in after the fall of the Shah was progressively more and more was progressively more and more restrictive on how you could depict yourself, and how you could attire yourself. But and she says it. There's this great bit, and I think I shot you the link for it. Like I said, if you want to intersperse shots of this stuff over the video, that'd be awesome.
Nah, I'm not gonna do that. People go read the book, or watch the movie, or do both.
There's a great bit where she says, I'm trying to remember this off memory. She's like, yeah, this was there is the conservative woman, and that's where only her face is visible under the clothing that she's wearing. And she goes, and then there's the modern woman, where she's like, she's still got a headdress on, but you can see the top of her hair just over her forehead.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
That is how we depict our dissent from the society. And then you've got the people on TV. Once again, something they didn't go into as much in Iran, and it's got this guy going, no, all women will have to wear the veil. There are rays, and once again, she colours this with her understanding as a child. And he says, there are rays that emanate from women's hair that causes men to lose control. And you've got her parents sitting there on the couch with her going, and her mum, and her parents just nail it all the way through. Her mum's like, well, that's it. They're only thinking like that because they're actually perverts. And it's, like I said, a good, and just going back to what you were saying before, a good example of confluence of both how kids do act versus combined with this regime coming in. I wouldn't say oppressive regime, it was, but this ideology being enforced on everyone. You've got this shot in the book from school where the school mistress is going, okay, everyone, you're being issued veils at school, and you've got to wear them. Or, headscarves. And, the kids are mucking around with the headscarves and doing almost anything but wearing them. It's like one girl's tied three of them together and is using them for a skipping rope. Another girl's, riding on the back of another girl. like a horse and using it as a bridle. One girl's already making a superhero mask out of it. Like I said, it's pretty funny stuff.
Yeah, I'm actually that's the first page.
It's hysterical.
Like, let me just read from that first page.
Please.
Like, the first panel just shows one girl wearing the veil. This was me when I was 10 years old. This was in 1980. And then the next panel is a bunch of girls wearing veils. And this is a class photo. I'm sitting on the far left, so you don't see me from the left to right. And then she names all the girls she's sitting with. And it's just, they're all so same. It's this oppressive nature of everything must be exactly the same, and no one can be unique or stand out at all, because then you're distracting from God. And like, that's the thing, people don't really understand the veil, and I will actually take up some defense for the veil as a religious freedom.
Yeah.
If you choose to wear it, that is fine. And the fact that Canada for a while was trying to pass anti veil laws, and France has said you cannot wear it in public unless you're in a mosque. I'm actually very, as someone who's an atheist, I'm very offended by that notion, and I guess I just don't understand it, because I'm from Indiana, and we have Amish people, and women always wear the bonnet. And like, this movie does a pretty good job of contrasting the veil with its Catholic cousin, the nun. I just don't understand how people see it as any different when it's done, or when it's being worn as a choice. I will defend it. Like, if you want to wear it, that's your choice, that's fine. If that's how you feel, if that's what your religion tells you need to do, and you feel that you must uphold that, that's fine. Like, I went to high school with a girl who wore the veil all day, every day. I never saw her without it. And her passion, what she wanted to do after she graduated high school and started going to college, she wanted to design dynamic, interesting clothing for Muslim girls so they could wear the veil and look good.
Wow, I'm so sorry she's not on this podcast. That'd be awesome.
I don't even know. I can't even remember her name, but I had a couple classes with her in high school, and I remember her giving presentations on how that's what she wanted to do. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff, like, if that's what you want, that's fine, but at the same time, that should never be enforced on people.
No, yeah, and that's...
Forcing someone to cover themselves up and hide their individuality is objectively wrong. And so that's the big problem with it. And she does a great job, I feel, of demonstrating that, because, there are people who want to do it, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to wear it, but it's the fact that they're being forced to that's wrong. It's the fact that they're being treated more sexualized because they're wearing the veil and the clothing and stuff than if they weren't wearing it. They're being treated more like sexual objects for that reason.
Yeah, it's a weird, don't get me wrong, it is a bloody weird reaction some people get where, the minute they think there's... I'm trying to find the right word for it here. The minute they think there's this arbitrary standard for what constitutes, the proper way a person should depict themselves, they're looking for any deviation from it to justify the fact that, they want to do things that other people would normally not condone. Seriously. It's pathetic.
And she clearly demonstrates several times. She does so better in the book, but there's a couple good scenes in the movie. Like the best one in the movie is probably when she's running down the street trying to catch her bus, and the religion police, or whatever you want to call them, the Brotherhood of the Brotherhood of the Islamic Republic or whatever. They pull her. They tell her to stop running, and they're like, "Ma'am, you can't run after the bus." And she goes, "Why not? I'm late." And they go, "Well, when you run, your buttocks looks provocative, She goes, well, quit staring at my ass, and then runs off. And they just sit there like, oh God, we were totally staring at her ass. Like, when you focus on, like, when you're looking for someone not to be sexualized, by that very act, you are sexualizing them.
Yeah, it's reverse
like, don't
psychology.
think about pink elephants. What are you thinking about? Pink elephants.
Briefly. I'm sorry, man. I can't think about you pink elephants right now. God, green lemurs going through my head. Anyway.
Now a green lemur riding on top of a pink elephant.
Good God, it's in there too now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But that's the thing. I mean, you know, they say a very, very great deal, but you have to read between. This is the kind of movie for people who read between the lines, like you were saying before, about sleeping in alleys, and like another.
Well, like the other things that they do in the book that I think really highlight just how absurdly sexualized they are because they're wearing the veil, and they show it briefly in the movie, is when they're doing the anatomy studies.
The book does it a lot funnier, if you ask me, but they do it well.
Yeah, they do it in the book too, but like I do like in the book better because they're like, they originally have a male subject and he's only wearing clothes, but they come in and go, no, you cannot stare at a man. That's not okay. You have to draw a woman. And they're like, okay. And then they bring in the woman and she's got like, you know, just layers upon layers of clothing on. And it's like, well, how is this supposed to help us draw anatomy? And I think that actually actively crippled her art style a little bit. Because you look at this, and like, she gets the proportions and bodies, everything okay, but everything is really, really, blobby in the book and in the movie.
Absolutely. And they have, the joke she uses in the book is, well, we couldn't see a single part of her anatomy, under the clothing that she was wearing. The upside is we learned how to draw drapes really, really well.
She has such a good sense of humor about all of it. And that's the thing, is like the humor gets you through some of the tough parts. And that's something I've always thought is, you know, when you are out of everything, what's the only thing you can do?
Crack a joke.
Laugh. Yep. That's the only thing that can get you through when you're down to nothing is laugh. And just accept it and find something humorous to laugh about and get you through it. And that's the thing, is like, the humor in this is just so brilliant, and like it's carried throughout, because there's that scene in the very, very beginning of the movie, and I think it's just I guess the delivery in my head was a little bit better than the delivery in the movie, but she has that line when she's talking to her grandmother and she wants to be a prophet. And she's like, laying out her rules of being a prophet. She goes, grandmothers will not be allowed to suffer. And her grandma goes, well, how will you achieve that? It simply won't be allowed.
In the comic books, they do a better delivery. She goes, simple, all forbidden. It will be forbidden.
Yeah,
And her grandmother, God, and it's not until you think back on your own experiences that you realize your own grandparents did this a few times, which is where you come up with some childishly simple but utterly innocent explanation for something, and they just smile and they'd say, "That's nice, dear," or they'd say, "Well, that sounds like a good idea. You should tell your parents about that." Then the minute you're out of earshot, they're trying to suppress just a gale of laughter.
Right, and that's the brilliant thing, though. She just goes, it simply won't be allowed. And her grandma is like, oh, well, you sign me up. Why didn't I think of that? It's so damn witty and smart and fun, and you just, like, at times at least, and it's hard not to laugh along with her at some of the, you know, she deals with all this absurdity and in a time and in a place where people just have no tolerance for absurdity.
It's not that they don't have a tolerance for absurdity, but it's just they get way oversensitive about stuff. Sorry, say again?
The people that she's dealing with have no sense of humor, though.
Like, her parents have, have a good
the,
sense of humor, and their friends have a good sense of humor. It's just
no. I'm talking about like the authorities and stuff.
Oh, well, the society that she's forced to confront. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like, they have no sense of humor whatsoever, and she's like, everyone she's dealing with in that aspect is just a nightmare for her to get through because they cannot smile. They will not allow themselves to smile or laugh or be entertained by anything.
I beg to differ on this one. There's one point where I differ on that. Her teacher at school. There's a great bit at the start where they keep talking about this. They've just brought in the veil rule. Technically, I think the word you're looking for is hijab, which is where you cover the hair on your head, and that's about it.
Yeah. That's the original word for it, but in the book, in my defense, she only calls it the veil.
Which I'll give you that.
She uses that exclusively. I'm pretty sure they're interchangeable.
Which is cool.
I'm pretty sure if I look up for a translation of hijab, I'm going to get the word veil.
Yeah. So anyway, it's not important. The important bit. There's this bit right at the beginning of the movie where they've just started talking about they've just started up the rhetoric about the martyrs and the blood and the suffering. And she collapses on the ground with her friends, doing a piss take on that, where she's like, "Oh, the suffering! No, I am not worthy. Please let me die." And her teacher's like, "Do you think that's funny?" And this is beautifully depicted in the movie. There's a little tonal change if you catch it between this pause between. Okay, she's not belittling the suffering. Her teacher gets it. She's belittling the overhyping of it, and the teacher doesn't smile. The teacher doesn't give doesn't condone any of it, but she's just like, yeah, get inside, go on. And you realize that, and this is something you can see with authoritarian regimes anywhere on the planet. The Soviet Union had their fair share of this, which is that, you have to teach yourself to frown in a lot of ways. You have to stop yourself from smiling and making fun of how ridiculous everybody looks going with these arbitrary standards that have no grounding in reality. There's more than a few times, and they do this really well in the comic book as well, where her mother goes, she walks inside, and the first thing she does is take off the veil. She's like, God, it's hot and stuffy in this thing.
Yeah. It's just the uncomfortableness of it all, but you just deal with everything. And, she has a lot of that in the book and in the movie. Good example from the movie is when she gets back to Iran, and she's, at the airport, and guys checking through her bag and everything, and he says, "Your veil, sister," because she has it pulled back and is showing, the top of her hair a little bit.
Mm.
And so it's just one of those things where it's like, well, I better cover that little bit of my hair up. I'm sorry, my hairline isn't back further. Just one of those things where it's like, it's really just no sense of understanding or anything. And in the book, there's probably a better scene where her and her husband are given a task as like a senior thesis class project kind of thing of designing a theme park based on Persian mythology.
Huh.
And at the center of the theme park, when you enter, right in the center of the entrance area, was going to be a statue of some woman from Persian myth, riding a horse, some warrior princess kind of thing, riding a horse, sword up in the air, and it was going to be a woman. And she's like, I talked to investors, and we really think that we could actually build this, and we just would need the government approval and the lands and such. And the guy tells her, listen, this was a nice project and everything, but we both know that they're not going to be comfortable with a woman on a horse at the beginning of the theme park. She goes, well, why not? Well, first of all, she wasn't fully clothed properly. Well, we'll put her in robes and a hijab. And he's like, well, you know that's not going to be good enough. And she's like, I know. It was a joke.
Yeah.
It's just like, what would we have to do? Do we have to take down the whole statue? Do we have to redo the whole park? What was the point of the project then? If we're not going to be proud to embrace our mythology, then why do we even bother talking about having it? Why are we proud of our history if we're covering it up?
Yeah, I'd like to speculate on which figure that was, but I'd have to look it up to be sure. There's a couple of contenders.
I got the book here. You talk for a minute. I'll see if I can find it.
Ladies and gentlemen, while Steve isn't here and Ian is busy doing research, I, Ozzy Griffin, will be taking over this podcast for the next couple of moments. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever thought about what you're going to do with your future? I know I have. And that's why I've started up the Ozzy Griffin Retirement Fund. And for the simple contribution of your entire life savings, you can help my future out immensely. And really, isn't that what everyone was born to do? Help me. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please consider and send donations to my channel. No, jokes aside though. No, there's a couple of contenders that come to mind. I know out of Islamic mythology, Muhammad's wife, sorry, that doesn't narrow it down. His first...
Zing!
Hey, that's not a zinger. That's just historical fact. It does not narrow it down. Technically speaking, he had a bunch of wives. Mind you, the reasons and the definitions become relevant. Anyway, no, he hooked up with a woman when he was younger. She was the head of a caravan. And this caravan leader, she was one of the first people to hook him up with, philosophies from different lands. She could be the person they were talking about, and that's one of the interesting things. There's a great. I'm just going to switch these.
This is Gord. Hold on. This is Gord Afraid.
Gord Afraid.
Gordafarid. I might be pronouncing it wrong. Imagine that. I'll just read this.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the butchering of your language tonight. Love it.
Yep. This is Gord Afraid, an amazing warrior. With the tip of her sword, she points the way to the hippodrome. Show me. And he goes, Half your characters are women without veils, seated on the backs of all sorts of real or mythic animals. We can see their shapes and their hair. We'll cover them up. A Gord Afraid in a Chordor is no longer a Gord Afraid. You know that as well as I do. I'm going to be frank with you. The government couldn't care less about mythology. What they want are religious symbols. Your project is certainly interesting, but it's unachievable. So a Gord Afraid is I guess like the name of the character or whatever.
Could be right. Anyway.
Well, I mean that's what it says. I'm pronouncing it wrong, I'm sure, but that's what it says in the book, so I am right.
Like I said, I'd have to look up Gord Afraid as a character from mythology. So, but that's exactly what I mean. There are anytime you get it, like I said, just switch the focus a little bit. You go back to the start where they're talking about the elections, and they do a brilliant bit, and it's all done with timing, where they go from the election here, her uncle who was a political prisoner. You go from him saying, look, there's been an election, we 99.99% of the populace have elected the fundamentalists to run Iran, and then they're like...
Yeah, he talks about how that's logical because people will turn to religion, but over time, soon they'll realize that the war should take place, And like he's so in denial because he's so hopeful about the future now that this oppressive regime has been kicked out, that he's sure it'll finally become the Marxist Disneyland that he's hoping for. And then it's just like as news gets worse and worse and worse, all he can do is say, "It's gonna be all right."
Yeah, I mean, it's brilliantly done. I mean, it's the tone of it is set by the way there's less and less light shone onto him. There's and it's the little spaces between the mini quotations. Those show that and this is what happens to people when things are getting bad. I love how she talked about the euphoria after the ousting of the Shah.
Down with the Shah. Down with the Shah.
It's
Jean, go to bed. Down with the Shah. Down with the Shah.
I love that bit. There's two moments in this movie that really made me laugh. That was one of them, because she was adorable. She's doing that. You can't even see her eyes over the table, and you can see her fist bumping behind. She's walking behind it. But she's, what do you call it? When she's doing in French, the translation is just revolution. So she's revolution, and it's, I don't know. I think it actually worked better in French, but that's just my opinion. But the what do you call it? But the revolutionary fervor. I mean, that's kind of, once again, it's one thing they depicted really well in the movie, in that she doesn't see, they don't show as much of what happens with the radical changes in the movie as they do in the book, because they show the aftermath of after the elections of the women's protests, where they disputed the veil. They were like, no, we don't want veils. We don't see the need for them. This is our country. We've just got it back. You're not really having a proper discussion here. And what they depict in the book is that there's, like, she goes with her mum to one of these meetings, and they see, and then they're attacked by the fundamentalists, who supposedly want to protect women by beating up women. Yeah.
Of course. That's how it works.
Yeah. To prove that, I believe in protecting my money. Ian will now fly to Australia, beat the crap out of me, and take all my money for safekeeping.
Exactly.
That's how it works, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to practice curling up into a ball and yelling "not in the face." Sorry, that's a reference.
Like, that's your money maker, really? Like that's where all the money gets made from.
No, it's a reference to the Tick.
I know.
Not in the face. Not in the face.
There's a lot of stuff from the book that's left out, and like I think it's a lot of little stuff for the most part. But I think the thing that I miss the most is her relationship with God in the early part of the first book.
Yeah, her wanting to be a prophet, which, okay.
That not just that, but just the way in which she imagines God, because basically God is her imaginary friend in this. And I don't mean that as like an insult to anybody, but clearly that's the way she's writing him. As, she just goes into a room and there's God and she has a conversation with him. And that's how she thought of God when she was a kid. And that's how I thought of God when I was a kid, too. In fact, you're kids. You don't know what the fuck you're doing. So, like, clearly God is her imaginary friend, and she's very devoted and everything as a child. And I just really miss some of the early scenes with that, because we only get it once. We only get her talking to God casually one time, but in the book there's a lot of stuff, because, like, her uncle tells her about Karl Marx, and she goes, wow, he looks a lot like God. And then the next time you see God's, like, asking her some questions, and he goes, do you really think I look like Marx? Yeah, and there's the better one though. The better one where she's talking to God, and he's like he keeps asking her a question, which is really brilliant. And one of them is, "Do you still want to be a prophet?" And she goes, "God, I don't want to talk about that right now. Can't we just talk about something normal?" And he goes, "Yeah, okay. The weather's gonna be nice tomorrow." Because he's God, he knows. So there's like a lot of little things like that that I really miss because it made the scene wherein she becomes an atheist so impactful for me.
I don't remember. I remember the bit where she tells God to go away from the movie, but I'm guessing that was
that's. Well, I mean, she doesn't outright say I'm an atheist now, but I mean, clearly that was the indication to me, at least.
There's a scene later on where she's once again talking to God, and Karl Marx is sitting on another cloud, and God's the people.
I don't like that they got rid of the whole. Do you think I look like Marx? I was really disappointed with that. See, that's the only other time that she sees him, and that's in a near-death experience.
Yeah.
I think the scene wherein she goes to have the visit with her uncle and then he's executed, and then the next thing she does is talk to God and tell him never to talk to her again.
Yeah.
That is the most heartbreaking scene for me, and that from that moment on in the book until the very last until the near-death experience scene, she does not talk to God again. She's either an atheist or has completely abandoned her faith, regardless.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up. This is a true story, and if you'll afford me the time to tell it, you'll see why I'm going to bring this up. My housemate has German family, and yes, as it happens, they wound up on the losing side of World War II. What a lot of people don't know is that one of his mentors, for want of a better word, of my housemate was in a Russian camp, a prisoner of war camp after the fighting stopped, or at least for a good deal of time after the war. And in the movie Persepolis, he talks about giving her a duck that it was the only thing he could do, that the bread they used was only good for sculpting. And he made an artwork for her instead of eating that actual bread. Now, it was a good motif in the movie where they depict him giving her another duck that he made out of bread. So basically saying, same conditions, worse results, different government. And the reason I bring it up is the fella who was in a Russian prisoner of war camp liked playing chess. It was one of the few things they had to keep their minds active while they were stewing away in there. And he made the chess pieces out of bread.
Wow.
The exact same. And when so now when I learned about that story after the first time I saw Persepolis. I didn't remember it until I saw the movie again. But yeah, so this is why I'm saying it's these little details that made the story, because you can clearly see the author has done her homework. She knows what she's bloody well talking about.
And it's not really doing her homework, it's just remembering the situation.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's these little details that if you've been through stuff like that, you can see that, or you've talked to people who have, she is talking about the real little things that you do to get yourself through these situations.
Yeah. And there's one scene in the book that I actually did miss a lot too, which is just on that same level of the day-to-day, really precise details, was her mother talking about how she put tape on the windows in big X's. Yeah. So that if there's a explosion outside the window, the glass won't, shatter and fly through the apartment. Yep. It'll all just collapse into one big it'll all collapse in one big pile. because it'll all be stuck together, basically. It'll keep it from flying apart like that. And, you know, just little details like that, because guess what? That's what I do in shipping. I work on e-commerce, and when we send out big pictures with pieces of glass, we put pieces of tape on the glass so that if it happens to break in shipment, there's less chance it will damage the picture. So just little details like that is so... It's just so rich with stuff like that, where you can tell that it's a legit thing. Like someone actually lived this. This isn't made up or fantasized or embellished at all. It's too real for that.
Well, that's really one of the reasons why she wrote the book. She wrote it to emphasize the commonality most people have. I mean, for all the things where she said she was a stranger in 2 different countries, she didn't really feel like she fitted back in Iran, and she didn't really feel like she fitted in France or anywhere else. What she did, though, was find universal things that so many other people have done in a place that most people, aside from the overhyped, way over simplified versions that you get in the mass media, most people don't even know it exists. Because, when you mentioned tape on the windows, the first thing I thought of was depictions of London during the Blitz, during the German bombing blitzes. And the thing about those was that first thing they did was give people gaffer tape for the windows, so that you could, once again, so that if it did shatter, you wouldn't have to be picking up from everywhere.
So I'm going to just real quick read the introduction of the book, and then I'll talk about another reason that she wrote the book, and I don't know how much I'll have to, but we'll just go ahead and do this anyway. In the 2nd millennium BC, while the Elam nation was developing a civilization alongside Babylon, Indo-European invaders gave their name to the immense Iranian plateau where they settled. The word Iran was derived from Aryan Vahio, which means the origin of the Aryans. These people were semi-nomads, whose descendants were the Medes and the Persians. The Medes founded the first Iranian nation in the 7th century BC. It was later destroyed by Cyrus the Great. He established what became one of the largest empires of the ancient world, the Persian Empire, in the 6th century BC. Iran was referred to as Persia, its Greek name, until 1935, when Reza Shah, the father of the last Shah of Iran, asked everyone to call the country Iran. Iran was rich because of its wealth and its geographic location. It invited attacks from Alexander the Great, from its Arab neighbors to the west, from Turkish and Mongolian conquerors. Iran was often subject to foreign domination, yet the Persian language and culture withstood these invasions. The invaders assimilated into this strong culture, and in some ways they became Iranians themselves. In the 20th century, Iran entered a new phase. Reza Shah decided to modernize and westernize the country, but, meanwhile, a fresh source of wealth was discovered: oil. And with the oil came another invasion. The West, particularly Great Britain, wielded a strong influence on the Iranian economy during the Second World War. The British, Soviets, and Americans asked Reza Shah to ally himself with them against Germany. But Reza Shah, who sympathized with the Germans, declared Iran a neutral zone. So the Allies invaded and occupied Iran. Reza Shah was sent into exile and was succeeded by his son Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who was known simply as the Shah. In 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh, then Prime Minister of Iran, nationalized the oil industry. In retaliation, Great Britain organized an embargo on all exports of oil from Iran. In 1953, the CIA, with help of British intelligence, organized a coup against him. Mossad was overthrown, and the Shah who had earlier escaped from the country, returned to power. The Shah stayed on the throne until 1979, when he fled Iran to escape the Islamic Revolution. Since then, this old and great civilization has been discussed mostly in connection with fundamentalism, fanaticism, and terrorism. As an Iranian who has lived more than half of my life in Iran, I know that this image is far from the truth. This is why writing Persepolis was so important to me. I believe that an entire nation should not be judged by the wrongdoings of a few extremists. I also don't want those Iranians who lost their lives in prisons defending freedom, who died in the war against Iraq, who suffered under various repressive regimes, or who were forced to leave their families and flee their homeland to be forgotten. One can forgive, but one should never forget. So, this is an interesting time that we're recording this video, because the attacks in Paris happened 6 hours ago right now. Yeah. As we're recording this, has just happened, and certainly, no one's pointing a finger at Iran or anything, but that entire region is just associated with, fanatical terrorism and stuff. And it's weird, if you look, in Western culture at least, it's associated that way. Yeah, if you look at pictures of countries like Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, from the 1950s or earlier, look just like any other nation at the time.
Yep.
No difference whatsoever. But because of Western involvement in the countries and who's gotten power because of who the West wanted to have in power, there's the Egyptian guy who basically started, an Egyptian version of The Daily Show. He was given a lecture one time, and he's like, imagine that I had access to unlimited supplies of wealth and weapons, and I gave all my money and armory to the KKK and the Westboro Baptist Church and encouraged them to seize political power here in America. What do you think would happen? And that is exactly what has happened in the Middle East over the last couple decades. Is all the money and all the resources have been given to the most horrible people that you can imagine. Yeah, and that's why the situation is fucked.
Yeah.
And so, her writing this is an example to show, no, we are actually people. The majority of people hate the way they're living there right now. But it's not because we're a backwards people. It's because the wrong people got into power, and that's the situation that we're left with at the moment.
Yeah, you could make a couple of cracks about statecraft here, but I'm going to paraphrase or quote to the best of my knowledge. I believe it was Rosie O'Donnell. I don't know anything about Afghanistan except that it's full of terrorists. Speaking as a mother. And to quote Bill Bailey from his show Patrol, which I hardly recommend everybody watch for his piss take on... this was under the Bush administration, you gotta remember. For his piss take on her, he goes, "Speaking as a mother, honestly, is that just code for talking out of my ass?" And, yeah, it's... What can I tell you, man? The people I've known from Iran in my life have been decent, great people. I knew one kid because his parents came over here. They were Iranians, as you obviously, but they were also scientists. That's one of the reasons why they got over to Australia. Mm-hmm. And that's the downside of a bloody, pointless coup or revolution. And you'll see this in parts of Africa as well. Anyone who had the means and the capital to back them basically makes a run for it as soon as a regime goes toxic and starts banning intellectualism. or they go underground and they try and bury their history.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny. I kind of wish Alex was on, but he has a great joke that I absolutely love, and I think it holds true.
Go, man. Go for it. Come on.
Revolutions are called revolutions because by the end of them, you're right back where you started.
Absolutely. That's the trick to democracy. You know, you're supposed to, what do you call it? You're supposed to say to people, you know, every couple of years, we're gonna have technically a mini revolution, which is where we'll have a big old argument, and we'll see whose idea for the future sounds the best. That is the idea for a democratically led country.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not, you know, that's the ideal. It's not necessarily followed, but
yeah,
certainly I that's a good ideal. And it's one of those things where, like, I find just how caught up in the moment people get to be so fascinating, because I mean it's hard not to be romanticized by the idea of revolution, right? It's, you know, like, throw the evil man out of power and
bring in the next evil one.
Well, that's the thing though, is you're not, it's so in the moment. It's like, yeah, he's done terrible things. He should be, like, you know, thrown into the streets and killed. And then, you know, everything will be solved. The people will be free and all the problems are gone. It's like, you know how rarely that happens?
Yeah, Rome used to have a trick to that. If you wanted, no, seriously, if you wanted a province pacified, you would take two leaders. You would take the guy you wanted to lead the province, who would follow your orders and get the people to do what you liked. You wouldn't put him in first. You would take the second guy. You would take the most loathsome, stupid, arrogant prick you could find, who could hold the position even tenuously, okay? And this guy would oppress people, ignore people, basically be a dick to everybody. And by the end of it, the people of that province would be screaming for revolution or would be screaming for replacement. And you'd say, well, look, okay, we can see that this guy's been kind of a dick to you, so we've got this other guy. And we think he might do better. Well, anyone's got to be better than this guy. Okay, fine. Look, I'll tell you what. The people have been heard. We'll throw in our replacement. And this guy, by virtue of lowering everybody's standards, looks like a friggin' prince among men.
Right.
And that's and he only has to show token gestures to respecting the culture, and he looks like a great guy. After Mohammed Mossadegh went, you know, you got a Shah who went, and by the time his abuses of power were done, and his self-aggrandizing lifestyle was well published, guess what? Suddenly the Muslim Brotherhood, who, as you quite rightly said, are the Muslim equivalent of the Ku Klux Klan, start looking pretty damn good.
Right. It's one of those things, it's just, the way you get so caught up in the romance of it all, you don't think about the long-term consequences. And, like, say what you will about American democracy, and especially early American hypocrisy. But
it's not the worst.
It's not the worst, but it's not the ideal that people hold it up to be. You gotta give it credit that, like, it was really lucky that we had that many geniuses working together at the same time.
It's
like, I'm not an Adams fan. Jefferson, obviously, you know, fucking slave owner. They're all slave owners. They all are pretty horrible people by modern standards. But I mean, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson were in the same room setting up the groundwork for American democracy, and it's shaky at best.
Okay. Madison was cool.
Yeah, sure, why not? You had all these, like, these guys who are... Alexander Hamilton was a genius. He didn't he wasn't smart enough to see that Aaron Burr was totally going to shoot his ass, but he was still a genius. And he set up like a fantastic idea for how an economy would work, and he had like all these great theories, and all these were all like really well learned people, so they really took the time to think about what the fuck they were about to do. But that's not how most revolutions work. You want a good example of how most revolutions work? Look at the French Revolution, which Is that still going on? Is that
technically yes? If you want to get technical, but
well, like there's an old story where basically the equivalent of the Secretary of State, I believe, for China back in the 70s or the 80s, was asked, "What do you?" Because he was known as a bit of a history buff, so they asked him, "What do you think the long-term effects of the French Revolution were?" And he goes, "It's too soon to tell." Yeah. So it's just like the fact that things don't always spin out of control is amazing. And so when you see it all go fucking to hell, you're like, well, of course. No one was thinking about what they were doing. They were just pissed off. How often when you're pissed off do you make the most rational, long-term, thinking ahead kind of decision? Never.
I know I do some pretty interesting thinking when I'm mad, and the problem is I'll say the truth before I think of how better to phrase it. That's the only downside.
Well, no, but you see what I'm getting at, though.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's a country in revolution. You talk to can I give you an example? If you don't mind me doing something a little closer to home, I was thinking Cambodia, Kampuchea as it used to be. When Cambodia and Kampuchea revolted, there was I'm trying to remember the dickwad's name. They had a revolutionary leader who had no sense of humor, was anti-culture, and this is when it was going from the French to local rule. And kind of like what happened in Vietnam. And with this guy and his regime, they flew people back, okay? They paid for the flights to get intellectuals back in the country. You're thinking, okay, that sounds great. And a lot of these people were shot on the tarmac with their families. Like, seriously. Like, and, so they, not only do you have the intellectuals who are smart enough to stay out of a war zone or a newly colonized or, recolonized country staying away, now there's going to be an enduring legacy thanks to this douche that, you give it a generation or two before you consider it safe to go back.
Mm-hmm.
And, they even internally, they'd say to people like, like if you wore glasses, clearly you had enough money to buy glasses, ergo you were middle or upper class. And you were clearly intelligent if you wore glasses, so you got to be shot. Once again,
and to connect that to Persepolis, there's that scene at the very end of the movie where like she's leaving Ron again as an adult this time, and she gives her grandmother a hug goodbye, and there's a cost to evacuating because she never saw her grandmother again after that.
Yeah, I mean that gets me every time. Because, it's never fun to say goodbye to someone at an airport. In fact, pop singer Björk was there, and she said she loves watching people at airports, even after she blew up at a bunch of reporters when she was just trying to be there with her daughter. Which, don't get me wrong, I get. But she says everyone's stressed and tired and unsure and by definition, in a lot of cases, a very long way from home. And she says, if you want to see the honesty of people, go to an airport. And yeah, my sister, she's seen the movie before I did. She can't see the scenes with the main character and her dad without tearing up. Don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen, my dad's fine and well and is retiring down to Mornington, Victoria. nice little place if you ever get there. However, that's entirely what I'm getting at. You know, she realizes that of all the things she had that made sense of life, you know, just being able to relate to her grandmother or get some perspective on everything was the one thing that she needed. Because for not being able to understand the languages everyone was using in France, she also found that you know, she wasn't able to understand a lot of the cultural ideas around there.
Yeah. And, like, the book, I think, does a good job of, totally slapping down an argument that a lot of people make, which is, you know, you always hear about shit going down in other countries and, you know, aid that's going to them and everything. And someone inevitably says, why don't they just move? Why would you stay there? And there's
Really?
that great scene. Yeah, I always hear
I've never
someone
come
say
across the "why don't you just move" argument very often. I don't think I've
No,
ever heard
let
anyone
me,
use that one.
fucking let me, shut your face, shut your goddamn mouth.
Go on then, alright.
No. Like, I hear this, like, why don't they just leave? And I'm just like, this book does the movie actually does a great job of showing that scene where it's just, you know, as the mom and dad, the mom goes, should we leave the country? And the father says, why? So that I can drive a car and you can be somebody's maid? It's just, you know, you're abandoning not just your home, not just your family, but your entire future that you've worked for, because you're probably, especially in a lot of countries, you know, your degree won't transfer. If you worked really hard to get a degree in something, it won't transfer. If you worked really hard to own a house or something, trying to move, you're not going to be able to get that money back, because that, guess what? When your country becomes a fucking war zone, property values tend to decrease for some reason. And like there's this whole thing going on right now. I mean, it's died down a little bit in the last couple months, last month or so, but not nearly as much as it needs to. There's the Syrian refugee crisis right now, and people are all over. Oh well, we shouldn't have to, you know, take them in, and you know, it's their problem, not ours. Blah blah blah. Like. And yet at the same time, it's always, why don't they move? Or why do people keep joining these extremist movements? Well, if you're put into a situation where you have absolutely no hope and someone comes around and says, hey, take this gun and then you'll be able to fight against the guy that's causing all these problems for you, of course you're going to fucking join if you're a young, stupid kid.
Yeah,
what the fuck is wrong with people?
John Perkins, author of Confessions of an Economic Hitman, he just flat out says, look, I've known people who technically qualify as terrorists, you know, or as freedom fighters, depending on what you want to call them that week. And he said that the freedom fighters, terrorists, whatever you want to call them, they never consider themselves terrorists. They never consider themselves to be, you know, doing anything other than trying to survive or trying desperately to get control of their country back. And like I said, I recommend anyone who's got the interest in the subject look up his books. I mean, it's not conspiracy theories; it is him talking about stuff he did that is on the record. And if you're it's kind of like the argument, why don't poor people just buy more money? You know, granted, I saw that on a meme someone created with Mitt Romney, but it's still but it's still the truth though. There's a sad story that's come out of this. The refugees from Syria over the last year, just about 8 months at this point ago. This one, and this is once again going to something I only touch on briefly. One of the free thought radio networks that I listen to who usually do like esoteric stuff, historical conspiracies. They do that sort of stuff. They, over the last 8 months, have gone hardcore into white nationalism. And I'm just like, where the bloody hell did this blow up from? You know, and I'm just like, oh, wait, they're Swedish. And, like, the Swedes right now have this, like, they're just like, oh, you know, we're being invaded. You know, we had trouble with, you know, border jumpers and everything else before. Now we've got to go full retard and just, you know, start.
You never go full retard.
Yeah, well, like I said, they're going pretty damn bloody close because right now it's like, yeah, okay, you know, we can't support them. And it's just going back to the history thing. I have heard all this stuff before from, believe it or not, it was popular in Japan to say, oh, we can't feed them all. Oh, there's not enough work for them, you know. What are we going to do with all these people? What do we do with the people who are there right now?
Yeah. It's one of those things that I want to get more back to the book, if that's okay.
Sorry. I went down rabbit hole a bit. Anyway, but that's, like she said, that's one of the reasons why she wrote the book.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because she does so much to just really flesh everything out. And I feel like
people.
Yeah. And I feel like the part of the book we haven't touched on enough yet is her time outside of Iran. Because, I mean, that's, you know, the movie and the book, that's like at least half of it. Yeah. And so I want to talk about that because, like, there's that idea of being an outsider both at home and abroad, which is really fascinating, but it's harder abroad because she's cut off from any kind of support. Like when she's in Iran, the situation is objectively more dangerous for her, but she feels more comfortable there because she has her family to hold on to and look to for help and support. And so she's happier in Iran because she has her family. But she's safer and doesn't have to worry about, you know, being killed when she's abroad. And yet she's not happy. And that's a really fascinating thing. And I think the scene that does the best job of that is when she's at a party and a guy's asking her what race she is, and she tells him that she's French.
That's right, yeah.
And as soon as that little white lie leaves her mouth, she just instantly feels bad about it and leaves the party.
I love how they depicted that. Her grandmother becoming her shadow.
Yeah, and just talking to her is like, oh, I didn't realize you were French now. And c'est la vie. And she goes, Emma, I'm sorry. It's the way they look at me. It's like I'm some kind of barbarian or savage when I tell them where I'm from. And her that advice her grandma gave her, where she's like, you know, always be true to who you are and don't be ashamed of it. And that's something that she has to learn because, I mean, that's what you're taught though. You know, like it's definitely fallen out of fashion now, and thank God because it needed to. But for a long time, it was just taught that white was the best. That everything else was inferior to white. I work at a Goodwill, and we got an old history textbook in at one point.
Sorry, what's a Goodwill?
Thrift store charity.
Oh, right, yeah, fair enough. Okay, yeah.
We got an old history textbook in from the beginning of the 20th century, and the introduction said, when we will be talking about history, we'll be talking about the history of the white race, since it's the only one to have contributed in any favorable way to the advancement of the human species.
Wow.
Right?
You're kidding. No, you're not kidding me. God. Oh. Man, that is depressing.
Yeah, and that's just how ingrained everything was. All of education, all of society was based on this one particular perspective on how everything should and does work. And so the idea that, like I remember hearing this on the radio, scanning for channels once. I actually stumbled across Rush Limbaugh, and
yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah, they were talking about some shit with like an African American football player getting mad that someone threw the N-word out at him. And they were talking about how he has no reason to get upset about that because black people use it all the time with each other and blah, blah, blah. And this dude calls into the radio station and he said, and believe it or not, I heard all of this in less than 15 seconds. This dude calls into the radio station and he goes, well, he doesn't have any reason to get mad. I mean, I'm German and my ancestry is German. If someone called me a crowd, I wouldn't freak out about it. Because it doesn't fucking bother you. You don't have any connection to your fucking German heritage, you cocksucking motherfucking idiot. When was the last time you walked around wearing lederhosen and drinking beer all day? You don't fucking do that. You have no connection. No one has any way to look at you and know you're fucking German, you goddamn asshole. You don't carry that around with you every fucking day and be treated differently and judged differently because of your ancestry. You're white. You don't have to deal with that. You are the norm. You're what is accepted and is expected, you fucking dipshit. Try to have 2 seconds of using your goddamn brain cells to imagine yourself in someone else's perspective on reality and what they have to deal with in a society that is built for your fucking comfort and convenience.
Just, to give it a broad brushstrokes overview. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what
so,
was... Yeah, go on.
Her perspective of being an outsider no matter where she is something I find endlessly fascinating.
Yeah.
The fact that she allows herself to become homeless because it just seems like the best option at that point is fantastic. And the scene where she starts taking antidepressants may be one of the greatest scenes in animation of all time.
Yeah, that's... I wouldn't say the greatest scene of all time, but it's...
I said one of the greatest.
Okay,
it's just so well done. It so perfectly depicts what depression is. Because, depression, like, the popular consensus, and it's completely wrong, but the popular imagination just is, they're just kind of down. You just need to get them out and around people and they'll be fine, or they just need to cheer up. And it's not that. It's...
Cheer up, stupid. Anyway.
Yeah. It's being completely hopeless and losing sight of the possibility of anything ever getting better. And the drugs often don't help. They can go very wrong. It's one of the trickiest things to treat. And, I have varied opinions on pharmacology, especially when dealing with psychiatric conditions. I'm not going to be like one of those people, medicine doesn't help, it's all in your head. No, medicine can help.
Courtesy
but
of the Church of Scientology.
Yeah, medicine is certainly helpful, but with psychological diseases, there's the way I think about it is, the medicine is to directly affect the chemical makeup of your brain. But the thing is,
it's a
your brain...
very, very fine balancing situation, yeah.
Yeah, your brain's chemical makeup is determined by your experiences and how you're feeling and how you're thinking. And then the chemical makeup affects that on top of it. It's a cycle. So if you only cure the chemical makeup, but you don't cure the life situation or the way in which you're thinking, then you're not doing anything.
Well,
it's just going to make your brain go back to that same chemical makeup over time. So you're just treating the symptoms at that point.
If I can just get a little bit personal on my end for a second.
Sure.
I've had my depressive episodes. I have not always been the happiest person in the room. I know, you're shocked, but in all seriousness, the one thing I was always dead scared of was the stories I'd heard about the medication when it goes wrong. Even the people, and this is one thing I will always give them in their favour, unreservedly. Even the people who are anti-medication are going to say the same thing. Never go off selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, cold turkey. Because almost every story I've heard of where somebody snaps and kills a bunch of people is where they've gone cold turkey on the things.
Gotcha.
And
well, I mean, that's a different matter and everything. I just wanted to talk about the way in which it depicts...
Yeah.
The way in which the scene in the movie depicts what depression is so perfect. And just that, she attempts suicide. Yeah, she attempts suicide with her medication. And once again, that's just such an honest thing that, I mean... I don't know if I'd feel comfortable writing something like that about I've never attempted suicide or but I don't feel like I'd be comfortable trying to divulge that about myself if I had.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could come out with something like that, even if I'd gotten over it. I just don't know if I could get past that.
It's an individual by individual case. I'm not going to lie to you there.
Right.
And just mind you, this brings me on to the next bit. The rebound. When she finally gets angry at herself and decides to get back in the game.
I love the
that was, I swear, that was the second bit, aside from her being an adorable kid, chanting revolution. That was the bit that got me the biggest laugh out of me. When she starts doing her own Eye of the Tiger.
And I love... she cannot sing at all. She cannot even kind of sing.
But the flash dance leg warmers from that sequence, her waxing her legs, that was hysterical.
It's the Eye of the Tiger, it's the thrill of the fight.
That was beautiful.
To the challenge of our rivals.
The fact that she gets reoriented after talking to her grandmother. She's like, hang on a second, this is what it's. I now remember what it's like to have my own opinion. And then she's like, and it's kind of hitting. It's not exactly the reset button, but it's her just going, yep, I'm ready for round 2.
Yep, and it's the perfect. I love that scene. That is so well done.
It was. It sums up a lot of the book. And when I see stuff like that, I'm just encouraged to, to say, yeah, that's it. Okay, it's done. She's won. That's it. Nothing more. Let's
Yeah.
But,
and that's the thing is it's just her relationship with her grandmother is so well done. Like there's that scene where she's going to meet the guy for the date, and so she's wearing makeup, and then the Brotherhood of the Islamic Republic shows up, and she has to think of something, so she accuses the one guy, and you laugh at it. When she's telling that story, you laugh, and then her grandmother just gets so pissed at her.
And rightly so.
Yeah. And, you don't think about it until her grandmother really freaks out at her, and you realize, yeah, she's still a kid in a lot of ways.
The scene is brilliantly done, because it's got about 3 layers. One, it still shows that they have flying squads of killjoys, with I might add, automatic weaponry. So that's one part of it. Actually, I think I was semi-autos. Not the point. With weapons. 2, it shows that people still judge someone harshly just for wearing makeup. In the country, which, let's be honest, dude, it's makeup. But 3, it's also a commentary on, and this is probably my favorite bit. Yes, you could go postal on someone who's being a sleaze. Do they probably deserve to be clipped over the years and told to, told to quit being a sleaze? Yes, absolutely. Is that going a bit too far? Let me think about it. Yes. That's why her grandmother kind of acts as the moral conscience
No. I don't think, like, if the guy had just been yelled at and, like, maybe, punched, like, hit in the head or, like, slapped in the face or whatever for, staring at her ass, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
It's the fact that they clearly arrest him and probably tortured him. That is the problem there. And I just, once again, just the fact that she's so honest about it. Because she thought it was hilarious. And you identify with her. You see the comedy in the scene. And it's just it's that joke gone too far kind of thing. Where it's like, yeah, I get it. You were in a tough situation. The guy was kind of an ass anyway. So he probably deserved something.
And let's be honest,
but he didn't deserve that.
Yeah.
You were the one that chose to wear makeup. You should deal with the consequences of that.
Yeah, but it's actually a bit bigger than that. It also shows that, she was just like, screw it, why shouldn't this oppressive state be used as something good for once in a while? She's trying to see whether there is a good side to having an oppressive state like that. And it illustrates magnificently that no, there isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy might be a bit of a sleaze. Yeah, it's been that long since you've seen a woman who looks that pretty, or has put on that amount of makeup. That's
and I mean, like the guy probably deserved to, get slapped in the face or whatever. I mean, there are plenty of guys, some of which I know, that'll admit, I've it's that Jack Sparrow moment where it's like he gets slapped goes up to the prostitute, says her name, gets slapped in the face, goes up to the other prostitute, says her name, who's that, gets slapped in the face. I deserve that one. There are guys that will admit, I was a dick right there. I deserve to get slapped in the face, but you don't deserve to get tortured. And just the idea of admitting through biography like she does that she fucked up and probably really fucked with the guy's life.
Yeah,
is really hard to do. And like that's some of the criticism that has been lobbed at her. And I mean, there's some weird shit like, oh well, she's not really royalty. On like,
that's
talking about people that have
really.
We're talking about people with like hundreds of wives. So there's probably a lot of royalty in Iran.
Yeah.
If you really start tracing the family tree there.
You're way back, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, we're talking about people with hundreds of wives. So no, the royalty thing is kind of just an aside to give you some grounding in how big that family could be. But just the nature of how like she's honest about, oh yeah, I had sex with outside of marriage, and
That's right, yeah.
My family's from a regime that actually was kind of sympathetic to the Nazis, and my I committed suicide. I attempted suicide. I was homeless. I left the country because of the repression. She fully admits to all these things that you're not that aren't heroic. These aren't noble heroic things that she does. She doesn't wear the T-shirt or whatever that says "Punk's not dead" on it because she wants to because she's actively fighting against the regime and is ready to go to prison for it. No, as soon as shit gets real, she's like, oh no, I'm sorry.
And she's the best line. No, it's not Michael Jackson. That's Malcolm X. And she's like, Michael Jackson Michael Jackson was still black at that point.
Yeah, I know, right? You had to think about that for a second. It's funny because in the book, the way she draws him, she only has two colors, black and white, and the way she draws him, it's white. It's just kind of funny. There's a lot of stuff like that where it's just. It's not heroic. It's not noble. It's a girl. It's a little kid growing up in one of the most fucked situations you can possibly imagine. Because everyone goes through that rebellious, angsty little shit phase of their lives when they're a teenager.
Most people don't do it while there's war on.
Yeah. But could you imagine being there in like a military dictatorship, oppressive style regime like this?
Well, after reading after reading and watching what I have, yeah, I can imagine it, but I'm pretty sure it won't do it justice.
No, but I mean, could you imagine having been that age in that area and trying to like, if you made some of the decisions you made when you were 13 in that kind of situation, how fucked would you be right now?
I'll get back to you on that one.
I wouldn't have a hand.
Well, why in the hell wouldn't you have a hand?
And, it's just one of those things. Like, I fucking got caught shoplifting. I probably would, be missing a finger or a hand by now.
Maybe.
I mean, it's obviously an exaggeration, but there's some shit that they do to people for fucking around. Like, you can't break laws and shit. There's no forgiveness in a system like that. It is over for you when you fuck up. Like, every single little mistake you make could be the end of your life, depending on who you talk to and how much money you're carrying that day.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, they bust her and her boyfriend for holding hands. And, they're like, well, unless your parents pay a fine, you guys could be looking at jail time. That's one of the things about dictatorial regimes. At some point, there's somebody trying to make a buck off it. Yeah. I'm kind of reminded of this episode of Blackadder from the first season, when, for political reasons, the Blackadder becomes the Archbishop of Canterbury. And as Brian Blessed... God, I love Brian Blessed. Anyway, Brian Blessed's character puts it, if I wanted someone who actually believed in God to be the Archbishop of Canterbury, I'd have put my other son, Harry, in there. Don't get me wrong, Rowan Atkinson has a healthy dislike of organized religion in most cases. But he has a bit where he's talking to his mates and he goes, okay, I figured out how to make some money in this job while we're at it. And he's like, and he's selling fake relics. It's as well done as you're imagining. I mean, it's Rowan Atkinson.
I've seen Blackadder, right? I just forgot that scene, but yeah, now that you remind me of it.
It's him at the peak of his game.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, but the idea of repression and everything, and just the idea of trying to come of age during that and go through the things that everybody does. Like, I was talking to Alex a couple weeks back about Zorro, and Alex is like, oh yeah, I remember getting in trouble as a kid for writing Z's and fucking other cultures and the way you pronounce the letter Z. For writing Z's everywhere.
I've been a bad influence on you.
Yeah, Zorro was a bad influence on him, because he watched the 90s Zorro cartoon where Zorro would carve a Z into things. So as a kid, he started writing Z's everywhere. And I just, every little kid has that moment where they're just such a little shit, and they've got to do something wrong for the sake of it being the wrong thing to do, because your parents don't want you to do that. It's funny, because I was actually a really good kid, and my dad always told me, it's like, oh my god, you're like the best kid ever, you're gonna be the worst teenager. And I freaking was. Oh my god, I was such a bad teenager. I got $500 speeding tickets at one point, and I got arrested a couple times for stupid fucking shoplifting stuff, and I, that's not half as bad as the shit I was doing, though. I got so much. I just did shit just because.
Just remember what a statute of limitations is before you elaborate any further.
Good point. No, but just to give an example of it, and to tie it back to what we were talking about earlier with the whole extremism thing. It's a good thing I wasn't particularly religious when I was that age. I had an interest in Christian mythology, but I was kind of an atheist before I knew it.
Yeah.
But if I had been, I mean, I was suckered into the whole idea of anarchism and everything when I was a teenager. And if someone had approached me before I came across those ideas and tried to talk me into, you know, if I were, say, a Muslim kid, tried to talk me into radical Islamist stuff, I would have fallen for it instantly. You know, just that's the age you're at, and they talk about that in the book, or in the movie, in the book, because there's that scene where like the one lady has that plastic key, and she goes, "It's the key to heaven," because they want them to join the military and become martyrs.
Was it plastic? I don't remember it being plastic. I remember the key.
They say it's plastic. Yeah, they say it's plastic. It's a plastic key, and it's the key to heaven, and it's like, yeah, I was at the age, and if I were just slightly inclined differently because of, you know, a more strict religious upbringing or something, and if I was in the area or whatever, you probably could have talked me into joining a jihad or into joining the military and going after, you know, and going out just to die.
Yeah, and that's like that woman was a really interesting character. I mean, like she did believe in her faith, like she wasn't stupid either. I mean, she was the minute the main character's father walks in, she instantly whips out her headscarf and covers up her hair. Mm-hmm. You know, and you know, her friend's like, why in the hell are you doing that? You know, she's like, it's what I was raised with. You know, it's tradition.
Like I said earlier in the show, there's nothing wrong with that. It's the fact that it's being forced onto people.
Yeah, and then you've got when they're doing the illegal wine operation, she's the one crushing the grapes.
God forgive me. God forgive me.
She's chanting that over and over.
That is too funny.
And you want to... You know, you want to... You laugh, but at the same time you realize the depths of where that's coming from, and you're torn between finding it funny that she's convinced herself to do it, and yet finding it tragic that she's really that conflicted over stepping on grapes.
Right.
I speak as an agnostic, not as an atheist.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things, like, people... Dawkins fucking loves to make people quote, like, one particular part of the Quran that says, if anyone who does not accept the Prophet Muhammad shall be killed. It's something to that effect. I'm like, you know, if you go through any ancient text, it doesn't even have to be religious, you'll find shit like that all over the place. That's just the time period it was. You know, like people forget that, you know, the Quran isn't just a holy book. You know, unlike Christianity and Judaism, Islam was a religious movement and a political force at the same time. Muhammad was alive during the first Islamic regime. And so the idea of, like, looking at it just for its religious reasons is stupid, because you're completely separating it from its political context, and it also had to work as not only a religious guide, but a book of fucking laws.
Not to mention the military strategy that went with it.
Yeah, for a society in ancient times. If I go look at any fucking book of laws for a society in ancient times, the very first code of laws, Hammurabi, motherfucking, if you throw, if a lower class person pokes out the eye at a party of an upper class person, they shall be put to death. But if an upper class person pokes out the eye of a lower class person, they shall pay a fine. What the fuck kind of justice is that? From the guy who's an eye for an eye. That's Harambe. What the fuck kind of law is that?
Yeah, that's the kind of... Just to extend that a little bit further, I know we're getting a little off topic here, but no, believe it or not, I argue that it's the logic of, the rich person clearly is more important because they can afford those fines. The poor person not only couldn't make themselves upper class, they clearly are clumsy enough to put out someone else's eye.
Yeah, well, I mean, in reality, the idea of nobility always came from those people are more important to the society because, like, we got a shit ton of farmers. We don't have very many, you know, I don't know, landowners, industrialists, business owners, whatever. We don't have many of those, so they're more important to the society than the lower classes. And I mean, that's once again, it's the context of the time. You can't say, oh, well, that's obviously not right, because you're looking at it from a modern perspective, where you live in a system where, yeah, actually not having a system like that kind of fucking works, and everyone really likes that idea.
Yeah.
But back in the day, that was fucking unimaginable. There was never anything like that. What could they possibly have done to strive towards something like that? That's stupid. Shut your mouth.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. There was a great TED talk about Islam from a Jewish woman who said initially, and she later goes on to say this with a cringe in her voice, as she said, "This such as hubris." She goes, "Yeah, I gave myself about 2 weeks to sit down and read the Quran. I was pretty confident that I'd understand it." And she's like, "Nah, didn't do it justice." Yeah, it's very much a product of its times. A lot of the wording seems ambiguous. It's written in poetry for the most part.
Yeah.
And I've read an English translation of about the first. This is before my manager tapped me on the shoulder and told me, "No, I'm sorry, we aren't allowed to read religious books at our desks between calls," because I worked in a call center at the time. So I've gotten about a third of the way through it. I know a lot of people are going to be insulted by that. However, I lost the copy for a long time.
You lost the word of God.
No, there's a debate to have now. No, but no, I lost that copy of the Quran. It was it was my great uncle's translation too. So, well, I'd like to say he did the translating, but no, he owned the copy of the translation. But
it's my great uncle's translation. You pretty much just looked at it and then made stuff up.
He spoke German. He spoke English. He spoke, but not Arabic, unfortunately.
Yeah.
No, he, like I was saying, if you understand it, like he
as a
plays
product
it.
of its,
Sorry.
As both a religious text and a law text, it is a very different read.
Yeah, it's in that respect, it carries on the tradition of, believe it or not, of the Old Testament, which is combination law book and a spiritual guide.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like a lot of societies back then blended their philosophy in practical matters with their religion for moral guidance. They did that because they saw the two as inseparable. It's not a totally bad idea, and that goes back. But on the other hand, you get what you have happen with the downfall of the Shah, which is that, and I'm just putting this narrowly. It seems like every generation has a group of idiots and
blames the one before. All of their frustrations landing on their door.
Yeah, Mike and the mechanics.
I know that I'm a prisoner to what my father said and done. And I'm sorry.
I will have my flying monkeys destroy you at some point. Just letting you know. Anyway, but like I was saying, what do you call it?
I got you off track. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, the problem is every generation has a group of idiots that at some point get to a critical mass, get together, crawl out from whatever bloody rock they're under, and try and say that, you know, they've got this great idea for the future, and if you buy today, you'll get the benefits tomorrow, and tomorrow never shows up. You know, and that's a lot of what happens with, like you said, with revolutions. These people, they're trying to make money off it, hence finding people for stuff that they normally do anyway. You get the really sadistic ones if you're unlucky, who aren't kept in check. Hence, sorry.
Yeah, you get the true fanatics, the true believers. It's all over the place, and I don't want to talk too much more about that because we keep getting further and further away from the book.
Sorry. I was going to go back to
I do feel like we're close to wrapping up. Is there anything else in the movie or the book that you wanted to talk about?
Just one last thing, which is the assistant to the publisher, the communists who were coming into the country. I mean, these guys were a good example of people who were putting their talents to use in a black market. I mean, you know, these guys, like the black marketeers, were funny. You know, haggling with the price of the Michael Jackson shave. It's like $60, $50, $60. Seriously, no, $50. And it's like, yeah, fine. Especially just plays ball. You know, that's I thought, like, I've gone to enough flea markets and talked to enough people doing dodgy deals, and I know for a fact that haggling is the same anywhere in the world. It's just one of my favorite things to see the black market emerging, kids showing each other, you know, the Western albums they've smuggled in, like ABBA. It's hysterical.
ABBA.
They've got one of the biggest fan bases in the world here in Australia. I'm not making that up.
Well, like, the other funny one is, like, you know, later on she's going to the black market right as she's going to the black market to buy stuff, her mom goes, "Is there a new Bee Gees single out or something?" She goes, "God, Mom, no one listens to the Bee Gees. They're so lame." It's like, just 2 weeks ago, you're fucking listening to the Bee Gees. And she gets, you know, the Iron Maiden, and she starts fucking air guitaring with the tennis racket. And, oh my God, that was so adorable.
Just wanted to bring that up as a last point.
Yeah. For me, this is just a fantastic film. The book
really
is even better. There's some things, and I mean, with anything, there's always going to be something missing or something you wish you had. The only other thing that I think I wanted to mention is I really do miss the scene with her father talking to her husband before he approves of their marriage. Says, normally this isn't a tradition I would respect, but being the country that we are in right now, being the regime that we're in, I have one condition if you wish to marry my daughter, and that is that you be willing to grant her a divorce should she ask for it, no, without a fight. And so, you know, the guy consents to that really respectfully and everything. And he doesn't think it's going to happen, but they do end up getting divorced, and it was a really good thing her father did that, because if he didn't, she wouldn't have known that he'd be comfortable with that option, and she might have been stuck in that marriage, given, you know, the rights of women at the time. And I just thought that was a really great thing. And it showed how forward-thinking her father had become since the revolution.
Oh, yeah, her dad's awesome throughout the movie. He's a great character. He's not afraid of his emotions. He's in touch politically. Like, there's a scene where...
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that he doesn't... early in the movie, before the revolution and stuff, he has more of a best-case scenario view and doesn't really plan for the worst. And the revolution really teaches him that lesson in a really hard way. And so he starts planning for the worst and expecting the worst things to happen.
And he, like I said, it's you do see the progression, including her, like, this is one small... It's a small scene, but it's condensed out of about 2 or 3 scenes from the novel. Or, well, book, however you want to call it. Where her mother is at a grocery store, and you see people fighting over the groceries. And as she's leaving, after basically telling these people, hey, well, you know, we could fight over this, or we could, you know, just work something out. And people are like,
we could just actually take only what we need, and then we'd all be fine.
Yeah, which, yeah, then gets told to bugger off. This guy's, yelling at her out in the parking lot, after saying some really horrendous stuff, which originally was said to them at a protest rally. He just, and it makes, don't get me wrong, it makes perfect sense for him to be saying that stuff in the street, because he's got the beard, he's clearly one of the religious conservatives in the country, and he, and he gets away with it, and she's crying while still angry and enraged as she's driving away. And, you know, it's a good condensation of about 3 different scenes, but it sums up the point of those scenes beautifully, where you can't get away with slapping him in the face. You can't, tell him to bugger off, and she wasn't going to call the religious police down on him.
Mm-hmm.
It's, and she realizes that, hey, she's going to have less and less recourse to tell these people to go screw themselves.
Yep.
It's like I said, just everything they did in that movie was to show the progression of both the characters and the society.
Mm-hmm.
And they do, if I may so say, a reasonably good job of it.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic film, and the books, like I said, it's even better, but only just because you have more of it.
Yeah, and even the artwork was deliberately done that way, because black and white eliminates, the skin tone issue that would stop some people from appreciating it.
Well, I mean, not just that, but, like, there is certainly, I know this is definitely the case in, like, Germany, but it's kind of just a thing that pops up in different regions of the world. Black and white means that there's no room for lies or ambiguity or anything. That's so when you put something in black and white, you're actually making a statement about it too, which is an interesting idea. And I'm not sure how much of that's here, but it is certainly something that was in my head while I was reading them. But okay, let's go ahead and do a score for Persepolis the movie.
I'm just thinking of what units to use.
Yeah, for me, I don't know if I can give it a... I'm going to have to do it, because my only problem with it is, like, a universal problem with translating something from a book to a movie, and that's not a fair thing to hold against this.
Yeah, it's...
So I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5 Persian mythological women on horses in amusement parks.
It would... I'd have to give it... I agree. It's a 5 out of 5 movie. There's just absolutely nothing wrong with it as a movie.
Yeah.
Just a question of what units to use. Look, I have to give it 5 out of 5 crystal clear raisins. If you don't get that reference, trust me, there's a good Islamic joke there.
Okay, fair enough. Everyone, thank you very much for listening. Next week, we'll be discussing whether or not history is truly the story of progress. Because I feel like history gets billed as the story of progress, and I'd really like to dissect and analyze that notion. So everyone, thank you very much for listening. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I am the animated statue that lurks in your closet.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.